Musician Sullivan Fortner, thank you for joining us to talk about your album Solo Game.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Before we get started talking about that, I want to ask you about something Miles Davis is quoted as saying. He said, "You should never be comfortable, man. Being comfortable fouled up a lot of musicians." How do you think being comfortable fouls up audiences? And I ask that because I think your album is not comfortable and challenges audiences to eliminate any preconceived ideas they might have.
Well, for better or for worse. um, I um I think that for an artist, I think it's important to constantly push. And I think as an audience member, at least for me, if I were in the audience, I like to see, and the people that I talk to about it, they don't like to see people performing too comfortable. They like to see some sort of struggle. I think that I think one thing that the pandemic kind of brought a little bit more to light is that the idea of watching people's processes, watching how people create. I mean, the things that are viral on like Instagram and social media is like, what do I eat today? What are the things I ate today? The things that how I clean my house. People like to, and those things get millions of views. Just the idea of watching people go through things and figure out formulas and struggle, make a mistake, and then do it over, and slip up, and it makes a certain type brings a certain type of humanity to the art or to whatever it is that they're creating. And so for me, if one of the things I try to do is I try to create real performances. I don't want, if it's a little bit too perfect, then it doesn't seem real to me. It's not human. The imperfections are the things that make the music alive and beautiful, and that's what I believe. So yeah, and that constant reach and that constant like almost is like that thing that almost helps to propel that forward.
How much do you think an audience is aware of that struggle? Because, I have music training and I watch you perform and I get no sense of struggle.
Um, well, I don't think that it's, I mean, in some cases that they're kind of aware. I think we give the audience a little bit less credit than we probably should. But I also think that there's also a little bit of if there's a type of banter or type of type of communication that happens within the bandstand, then people can get that. They're like, oh my God, what's getting ready to happen next? Uh-oh. Oh, the drummer's going crazy. Something done happened. You know what I mean? The drummer just gave the bass player a look. Oh, he doesn't like him too much. Stuff like that. I think.
Right. Now, for people who haven't had the chance to hear Solo Game yet, which is a truly incredible album, it is solo and game. There are two parts. And on the first part, you perform in a very traditional style, solo piano. It's my understanding these were full takes. This was not patching together 8 different performances to get one. It was just you did it once or twice and got it. Um,
Yeah, once. The Fred Hurst was like, look, we're doing every song once.
well, right.
Yeah.
And game allows you to expand what you do, what people are used to hearing you do by introducing electronics and loops and vocals that are not traditional and various instruments. What is the conversation you want to have or you are having between solo and game? And how does that give us a better understanding of who Sullivan Fortner is?
Um, I think I wanted I wanted both solo and game to reflect Sullivan Fortner, not so much the pianist, but the the artist, the musician, and the thinker. Um, I wanted talking about that level of exposure and being exposed. Both um both sides of the album were exposing and like very exposing for me. Acoustic being okay, I'm playing by myself, completely acoustic piano, no edits, no second takes, nothing. You know what I mean? Just Fred Hurst telling me how he wanted me to play it. And then the other side being, okay, now I get to play whatever it is I want to play, but on instruments that I've never played before, you know, and just experimenting with limitations. Both of them have that idea of experimenting within a certain type of parameter or limitation. Both of them kind of question the idea of like, you know, when we play music, do we actually play music? You underline that word play. So when you think of that word play, you think of, okay, games. So what type of game am I playing? And in both sides of the album, there are various games that are constantly being played. Some of them kind of link with each other, like reflect, both sides kind of reflect each other. Like there was one game that I played on the acoustic side of the album, because I didn't know what time it was when I played that one. That game, Fred Hurst said, okay, I want you to start with one note and then let that grow into the melody at the end. You know, that's one game. On the other side, the name of the game was, okay, it was a compositional game. So take cross and circles. I was inspired by this writing technique where like different authors or whatever would circle and highlight their favorite sections of a work, and or their favorite words, whatever words moved them, they would highlight it and then erase it or like cross out the words that they didn't want, and then formulate a new sentence based off the words that they liked on that page. I took that concept on All the Things You Are, and I took out the two sections that I liked the most and created a brand new tune from that. So those types of ideas, the idea of having fun and playing and experimenting and actually playing music as opposed to playing music, you know.
Right, right. A little more freedom, in fact.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how important is it for you for the tradition of jazz music to evolve as it always has and as it inevitably will?
Um, I think that it's extremely important. I think that it's also important for jazz musicians to kind of use the tools of the studio. I had a conversation with a great musician and great friend of mine who basically said, when we go in the studio as jazz musicians, 9 times out of 10, we use Pro Tools to edit a part that we don't like and splice it and make it, this is something that we actually do like. You know, that's the most we use it. Or like a singer would use Pro Tools or Auto Tune to correct a note, you know what I mean, or to fix their vibrato or to whatever. They don't use the studio and use those programs to help as an extra instrument for the music. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So what I wanted to do in this album, especially with the gain part, I wanted to kind of use pitch correction as a part of the music and not to fix whatever I did that was wrong.
Almost as a compositional tool instead of a correctional tool.
There you go. That's what I want to say. You said it exactly the way I want to say it. Also, I wanted to I also think that it's important for the musicians to kind of not be so precious with the studio. It doesn't have to necessarily be, for me, the idea of it wasn't necessarily be perfect. It was to be honest and to show like a real representation of who I am and where I am at that particular time. And I think that a lot of times, especially younger jazz musicians, we're all so gun ho about creating the perfect album rather than creating an honest album. You know what I mean? This album that I created by no means is perfect. I already know, but I know that I can honestly say that I'm proud of it because it's the most me that I've ever created. You know.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I'm sure you know that Giovanni Russinello in his playlist on November 17th, listed both Congolese Children and Spacewalk as two tracks that people should listen to. And in
Wow.
writing about you, he said it would be possible to mistake you for a traditionalist. And I think
Mm-hmm.
most people who've seen you would agree. How long has this other side that wanted to play in the studio, that wanted to not be afraid of the studio, not be afraid of the technology, but use it in a different way, how long has that been buried inside you?
Um, if I'm honest, COVID actually birthed that side of me. um, I mean, the first instrument that I grew up playing was organ, Hammond organ. Before I started playing piano, I was playing organ. So,
Oh, that's not true. You had a Fisher Price piano when you were 4.
well, yeah, but yeah, okay. I'll say that my first love was the organ.
Right.
My first love was the organ. Um, so electronics and manipulating sounds within the limitation, within the capabilities of an electronic instrument was was something that had always been in me since I was 7 years old.
Right.
Um, but I never really thought beyond the organ, until COVID. You know, I kind of messed with keyboards a little bit because I never really owned a piano when I grew up. I only owned keyboards. But I would just stick to the piano patch and try to manipulate the piano patch. And then maybe there'll be some times where like I could record on the keyboard. So I would like add like instruments me just with the keyboard patch. But that was just for fun. Um, but the idea of actually going in the studio and doing that was inspired by COVID and Cecile McLaurin Salvant. Yeah.
Well, she keeps subtly reinventing herself. I mean, that's the thing I love about her. They're not radical shifts. It's not like suddenly Bob Dylan is playing an electric guitar,
Mm-hmm.
but there are these subtle shifts and every one of them makes sense. That has to be an
Mm-hmm.
inspiration.
It is, and I think being on the side of the stage that I sit on whenever I see her, and the more I get to know her, the more I realize that she's becoming more and more and more herself every album. And I think that that's the most inspiring thing, to watch her evolve as an individual, as a woman, as a human being on this planet, and as an artist, and watching her just really step into what makes her unique and special in her eyes. I think that's yeah, that's the most inspiring thing. Just her being excited about her being herself.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, even though you said that this project was born out of the pandemic, in 2016, you told the Oberlin Review that music is like a drug. You're chasing that first high, the high you got the first time, you played music and really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said, since then, I've been trying to chase that feeling. What was the
Yeah.
feeling you were chasing, for a solo game? What was the high?
Uh, you want the honest answer?
Sure. As long as you want to give
Um,
me, as long as you want to give me the honest answer.
well, the high. Well, I came in. I went in the studio nervous, and Cecile basically said, "Just go in there and relax." So I took like an edible or something, before I went in the studio. So that was automatically relaxing. That kind of got rid of the nervousness. But I think the high that I was chasing was just that feeling that I got when I was a kid and I didn't know anything. I was just happy to play. You know what I mean? I didn't know any complicated chords. I could only play in like about 4 or 5 keys. Um, I didn't have, there was not really a whole lot of harmonic sophistication. There wasn't a whole lot of rhythmic sophistication. It was just me playing the songs to the choir can get through and having a good time bouncing around. I didn't know anything. I was just happy to play. That was the high that I was chasing.
What you were chasing was that lack of fear.
Yeah, that's it. No fear. No fear. No fear. Just getting up there and just doing it. even if it sounded bad, just going through, just riding through until it actually sounded like something. Mm-hmm.
Did it take a lot to be comfortable in
Oh,
the recording of this particular album? I mean, you didn't have room to worry when you were working with Fred Hirsch, because you had one take of more songs that appear on the album.
well, I mean, I kind of did, because Fred is not an easy person to please. He's a very nice man. He's extremely nice, been very, very kind to me, but he's definitely particular about what it is that he likes. So whenever you're in a room with somebody like that, you automatically feel like this pressure of doing, anything you possibly can in order for to sound good. You know what I mean? Um, but I think with the game part, it's a little bit more like I was kind of left up to my own antics. So it was fun making it, but I had to suffer when I was shopping the album around. I had a little bit of a difficulty trying to find a home for it, and people who actually would have wanted to support it or back it up and help me put it out, because it was so different and so so unorthodox. It was a little bit hard, but I found it through artwork, pianist, and that was it.
I'm assuming you probably got a lot of offers to release the first half,
Well,
because
here's the one. Here's
that
the
would be my
funny part.
expectation of the industry.
So here's the funny part. When I shopped it around, I only shopped around the game part, minus the edits. Minus the edits and all the added sound effects. Um, Once I found the label that was interested in that, then I gave them the acoustic album and said, okay, I want both of these to come out at the same time as one album. And they were like, well, we'll put out the acoustic album, no problem, but this other one we gotta wait. I said, nope, it's either both of them or none of it. And then they were like, okay, we put them both out.
Right.
Yeah,
You have to stick to your guns, because if you don't, who else is going to, right?
that's right. I mean, it took a lot of guts, and I almost gave in, but thanks again to Cecile and to Jason Moran, they were like, no, this is what you want to do. You need to do it that way, you know.
Well, and it makes sense that Jason would be a supporter of doing that. If you look at how his career started and what he's doing now, I see a through line through all of it. But I think there are a lot of people who go, why isn't it all just this early stuff?
Mm-hmm. Um, I mean, I guess I mean, well,
I,
one thing about it, I think one of the things I wanted it to stick out. In the last 2 years, basically every piano player, every major piano player, people who are soon to be major, in my opinion, have released solo albums. Jason Moran, Brad Mehldau, Ethan Iverson, Kevin Hayes, VJ Ayer. Like Fred Hirsch, they've all released solo albums, especially during COVID, because there was nothing else to do. Everybody was just releasing solo albums because they couldn't play with bands, you know? And so I guess I wanted this album if I was going to do a solo album, I wanted it to stick out more than just being acoustic piano. I wanted it to be an all encompassing solo situation. So part of it was sticking out. The other thing was I wanted to kind of make a statement that, like, okay, I'm not just a piano player. I'm also, someone that kind of has a idea or some sort of a vision musically.
right.
And that just goes beyond just the 88 key box.
Exactly. Now you've referenced Fred Hirsch and Jason Moran. They're both teachers. They were teachers for you, their influences, their inspirations. How do you think the three of you represent jazz piano music as we near the end of the first quarter century of the 21st century?
I think to me, I think Ooh, this may sound weird, but I think it's kind of about lineage. I think we all come from there's a lineage. Both Fred and Jason have Jackie Bayard in common as teachers. So when you think about Jackie Bayard as a pianist, you think about someone who was one of the first complete jazz pianists who were able to play in all of the styles. You know what I'm saying? So that idea of pedagogy and that way that he taught, and then the offshoots, then you have like Andrew Hill, and then you have, the love that they have for Monk, and then what I'm saying? You see that there's a lineage in how they taught and the people that, that they've instilled in me, and not just me, but all the people that they've taught, also Christian Sams, Sam Harris, Fabian Almazan, and on and on and on and on and on. You know what I'm saying? There's a certain type of lineage that we come from through those people. And so I think that's what connects us. That's something that and that's going to connect people kind of continually for people even after us. Just the idea that understanding that this thing really comes from a lineage of pianists,
And I haven't had the privilege of speaking to Fred Hirsch, but I've spoken to Jason many times, and I know how much lineage is important to him. And knowing that history, you can't do what you do even in the 21st century without knowing that history first.
You are absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's important, and not just the history of jazz and jazz piano, but understanding the history of music. Understanding the history of music as it relates to all the other arts. Also, Jason is really, at least it seems like me in the last few years, he's really been dipping his toes in the many different art forms and the history, understanding the history of it and how it connects to society. And you know what I mean? You have to kind of understand that in order to be as prestigious and as, whatever as he is.
Right. Now, before we started the recording this interview, I mentioned that I'd seen you with Cecile multiple times. And it strikes me that you guys, the two of you, do not have a traditional vocalist and accompanist relationship. I feel like I feel like when I see a Cecile McLaurin Salvant and you're on the stage with her, it might as well be Cecile McLaurin Salvant and Sullivan Fortner, because you two are so intrinsically tied to one another musically. Does this feel like a unique collaboration that is different than what you have seen or witnessed or even experienced as a pianist and a vocalist working together?
Yeah, it most definitely has, and it was like that from the first time we played together. From the very first note, it felt like it was it felt like we were immediately at home. At least it felt like I was. Like I could literally play anything. I remember when I first called her to do a gig, I was nervous, and I called Aaron and I said, "Aaron, how do I play with this girl? She's so good." She said, "Oh, Sullivan, Cecile sang through a Hurricane 5, you know, or like a tornado. She could sing anything and it'll be completely fine. Her pitch is great. You can't lose her in the form. She has good time. You'll be fine." And when you deal with someone, when you're playing with somebody that has that type of independence, to where you don't feel like they're relying on you to make something happen, then you just kind of become like these. You ever read the book The Prophet? And they say up there, they talk about relationships and how like the relationships should be like trees, individual but like connecting in some kind of way. I think that's how I look at my relationship with Cecile. We definitely are individuals, but for the first time, I actually felt like I could play with somebody that I could grow with. You know what I mean? That wasn't waiting on me to play catch up.
Right. And also on somebody who seems like she can call out almost any song, and I've yet to see you say no. It's like
that sometimes where I'm like, I don't know it, but she'll sing it anyway, and then I'll have to pick it up. But again, like her, her sense of harmony and stuff is so good, she can pretty much guide me through even songs I don't know.
Right. Now, in the times that I've seen you perform, it seems like I want to know what the process is in your mind as you're performing, because you have access to so much music in your head. How do you make those instantaneous decisions to either go in this direction with the melody or the harmony, whichever part you want to do, or throwing in references to other songs? Because in watching you, I just sort of go, okay, well, he could have gone probably 50 different ways, but he chose this one in this moment. What's the editorial process, or is there one? Is it instinctual?
Um, a lot of it is instinctual. A lot of it is instinctual. Um, I'll play one thing and it reminds me of something else, and I'll just go for that. Like if I'm playing whatever this feel is, or this melody reminds me of this this Brahms piece, so I'll play that. I'll hint at that. Or this piece reminds me of this Shaka Khan lick that I found. That could work and meld, try to mash those two together. So, well, what if I play them both at the same time? Maybe I could try that. If I fail at that, then I'll try to make it work. You know what I mean? So there's always this constant, again, going back to the games. It's just like this constant game that's happening in my head. Well, I'm just like, okay, this reminds me of this. Let's see what happens. Maybe if I try to meld the two, or if I, take a snippet of this and, maybe play it in a different key and see what happens. Maybe put in a different time field, whatever.
Now, Solo Game was recorded during the pandemic, and it took a while, as you mentioned, to shop it around and find somebody who was going to do it. But that's given you all kinds of time to develop new ideas and new ways of expressing yourself, because this is something that's probably was recorded 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. So I'm wondering where you are headed with new material now.
Well, I'm kind of thinking I'm kind of thinking about continuing along this path, especially in the studio. Again, going back to using the tools that are available in the studio as a part of the composition. The next project that I'm working on is a trio album. It won't be a double album, but it'll be 2 different trios. One trio would be with Marcus Gilmore and Peter Washington. And another trio would be with Tyrone Allen and Kayvon Gordon, who are a group of guys that I've been playing with for the last year or two. And they're a lot of fun. They're young, but they're a lot of fun to play with. And that's the next thing, to try to figure out and be a mixture of originals and standards. A little bit more towards the traditional side, but a few surprises maybe. And after that, I think the next thing I want to do is a choral album, which would feature just piano for the most part and vocals with my family singing. So I'm in the process of writing stuff like that. So it'll be kind of like I'm kind of trying to continue along in the vein of game and kind of like building a catalog, as opposed to creating separate worlds that each album stands in and lives in.
Right, and proving you got more than one kind of game.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of games around.
So, last question I have for you, Sullivan. I want to ask you about something Duke Ellington is quoted as saying. He said, "Art is dangerous. It is one of the attractions. When it ceases to be dangerous, you don't want it." What?
I love that.
I do too. So, for you personally, what do you want most from your art today? And what do you think your art wants most from you?
Well, my art, I guess the art wants from me fearlessness, not being afraid to try and not being afraid to step out there and being you and being confident in that. I think what do I require from people who follow the art is the other question?
No, what do you want from your art? What do you want your art to give you?
What do I want my art to give me? I want the art to just continue to give me what it's already given me, which is just like a sense of purpose and being able to, continue to help me to articulate what it is I can't say through words. And to help me to discover more about myself and discover more about the world around me. You know what I mean? The art teaches me music, and art teaches me about life and learning how to, how to get along well with others, to compromise, to live in harmony and peace and balance. That's the stuff that art gives me, and I wanted to continue to.